Sounds like it.
All right, it's 9:30, so we're going to go ahead and start the meeting. Before we start, I'd like to go around the table and have everybody introduce themselves. So we'll start with Eric.
Eric Gonzalez, House Democrat, Fiscal Analyst.
Jessica Harmon, Legislative Services Agency.
Zach Jackson, Deputy Budget Director.
Liz Brown, alternate, State Senator from District 15, Fort Wayne.
Alicia Nafziger, House Republican, Fiscal Analyst.
Bob Cherry, State Representative, alternate, District 53.
Ben Tooley, House Republican, Fiscal Analyst.
Tim Brown, State Representative, District 41, Crawfordsville.
Ryan Mishler, Senate District 9, Bremen, and this is my region. So welcome.
Seth Hinshaw, Senate Republican, Fiscal Analyst.
Jason Dudich, State Budget Director.
Karen Talion, State Senator, District 4, which is Portage, Northwest Indiana, up to Michigan City.
State Senator Greg Taylor, Indianapolis, Indiana, alternate.
I also want to introduce Representative Jack Jordan, also from Bremen. Thank you for joining us, Representative Jordan. And now if we could have a few words from Chancellor Allison.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Terry Allison, Chancellor at IU South Bend, and I'd like to officially welcome you to our beautiful campus for your business meeting. I had the privilege of giving you a brief update about IU South Bend at our breakfast this morning, so my comments are brief. As a regional public university, IU South Bend plays a critical role in North Central Indiana and beyond. We are dedicated to our mission of preparing the workforce of the 21st century and advancing the economic, cultural, and civic growth of the communities we serve. Last month, we celebrated the 1,035 graduates of the class of 2018. They make us proud of our work and our institution. They will make a difference in a changing and challenging world. They also have an immediate impact on the quality of life here, as 65% of our graduates stay in the area to live and work. Indiana needs more college graduates to compete and grow in the new economy. I have heard from many local business owners, big and small, who say they need workers educated beyond high school. As you heard in my earlier presentation, IU South Bend is working with Ivy Tech to produce more post-secondary graduates. We are also doing more to help our students graduate sooner and with less debt. As a public university, we appreciate the support of the state and of the Senate Budget Committee. You have helped put Indiana in a good position for growth, especially when compared to our neighboring states. Thank you for your commitment to higher education. Special thanks goes to Senator Mishler for bringing this meeting to IU South Bend so you can see firsthand the good work taking place here. As a member of the IU South Bend Advisory Board, he understands the value of regional campuses and our needs. As Chancellor, I appreciate the time, energy, and support he has given to this campus and to higher education in Indiana. I did mention earlier this morning that Jan Joseph will be taking over as interim Chancellor here at IU South Bend. She is here. I'd like to have her stand briefly and be recognized. And I see that several of our faculty in the sciences are also here. I know we're not having a presentation on facilities, but I know they're very interested in Northside Hall, and thank you for coming out this morning. If you get a chance to speak with our faculty members, that would be great. So the job you do is not easy. I hope your time here today will help you when you are making tough decisions about limited resources. Thank you again for coming to IU South Bend, and thank you for the work you do on behalf of the citizens of Indiana.
Thank you, Chancellor Allison. Thank you for your service to the university and to the community, and enjoy your next venture in life. So thank you very much. We have distributed, sorry, Senator Talion.
Are we streaming?
Yes.
I have Susan out there, and she's looking for a stream, and she said she's not getting anything.
We'll check. We're going to have someone check on it.
All right, thank you.
You have the minutes in front of you from the last meeting. Are there any amendments to the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the April minutes.
Second.
Can we take that by consent?
Consent.
Consent.
We have a proposed agenda in front of us. Are there any amendments to the agenda? The agenda is placed on the table for discussion, so we will start with the projects. First one is Department of Revenue.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Two of them.
My name is Ed Vance. I'm the CFO for the Department of Revenue, and I'm joined by Kevin Gully, who is our CIO and project manager for the ITS, or the Integrated Tax System Modernization Project. Kevin and I want to thank you very much for allowing us this opportunity to present our request today for a future funding for our fiscal year 19 appropriation of $16.9 million. This funding brings our total request for this project, which is, of course, a multi-year, multi-phase project, to $33 million. And since the last time that we were here, we've made great progress on the project itself. This, of course, is our second funding request. And a year ago, when we were in front of you or so, since that time, we have invested $2.5 million in this project of our initial funding. And as a result, we expect to carry forward $13 million of our initial funding. And that carry forward is really the result of extended timing and sort of working through the RFP process with IDOA. So ultimately, we think we've gotten to a good place with the project, and we've got a good partner to move forward. Kevin will talk to that shortly. But the significant portion of our investment that we anticipate making simply just shifts to fiscal 19 from 18. So that $13 million that we're carrying forward, we anticipate that that will be spent in fiscal 19. So now Kevin's going to come up and give you a bit of a background on the project scope, talk about the history a little bit, and obviously give you an update on the current status of the project as well.
I appreciate the time. Let me give you a little context. In 2016, as you know, we went through a feasibility study which gave us the information that enabled us to create a disciplined RFP process. Last year in 2017, we went through the RFP process and found our solution partner. That solution partner is Fast Enterprises and the Gentax software solution. Fast is a leader in the market in over 26 plus states, all on time and on budget with successful implementations, which was one of the reasons why we selected them. Current state of the project, we are in contract negotiations and have come to terms with Fast just recently. We need to go through the approval process with IoT, SBA, et cetera, until we close that out. The tentative start date for the project is August the 20th, though we will have a small team in July to set up the infrastructure and also go through some security certification process. The contract is really set up in two components. It has a implementation services component and then an ongoing support and maintenance component that lasts for 10 years. The current scope of the project, it's 4 phases and 47 months. That's that implementation services component. It's in 4 phases, as I said before. The first phase is corporate phase, where we'll transition our corporate taxes from our legacy environment to the new environment. Phase 2 will be sales and trust taxes. Phase 3 will be our individual taxes. And then phase 4 will be special taxes, things like cigarette, OTP, aeronautics, et cetera. It includes all functionality. It is an integrated tax system, everything from customer service components to revenue enabling components like returns processing, payment processing, et cetera. That's all I have. Do you have any questions?
Can you refresh our memory on the total estimated project cost?
The total estimated project costs are roughly $92 million.
Yeah, $92 million.
The contract component of that is $77,680.68.
Representative Brown.
Thank you. So it seems like it'll take about 12 months for each segment?
It will,
Is
yes.
that what the contract says, or is that?
That's what the
general
contract
contract?
says. Though we do have in the statement of work an ability to flex that a little bit if we want to move some taxes up front, to front load it, et cetera, but that will be agreed upon. It's a 47-month engagement.
Okay, and so starting in August, the corporate, and we would anticipate by August of 2019 that the corporate would be changed
Yeah, August
over?
or September timeframe, which is very timely because that's when the extensions come in, and it's not at the peak time.
Okay.
So it's an optimal time to do it.
Okay, okay. And are you having stakeholder kind of interaction, CPAs or people?
We have.
who
We've
do-
reached out to the CPA Society, other forums, and we will do that throughout the project with an outreach program.
Thank you.
Senator Talley.
Thank you. Can you explain, I'm not quite getting this. So we did 16 million in 18 and 16 million in 19, and you haven't spent the 18, but, yeah, and you're carrying over 13, but you're asking us to appropriate 16, almost 17. Tell me how that money is working.
That's correct. So the $3 million that's been spent has just been obviously de minimis relative to the total amount. Most of that has just been for selection and evaluation services for outside counsel to help us through this process and other contract work, including IT contractors to sort of lay the groundwork for the preliminary phase of the project. We had anticipated that by this point we would have had our vendor partner selected, which we do in fact now. We thought that would happen a little bit earlier. If that had happened, there would have been a major milestone payment just for the licensing of the software itself, and upfront payment as well on maintenance that would go for the duration of the implementation services over the 47 months, if you will, as well. So those payments would have been in excess of $10.2 million alone. But again, since we're just now really at a point, as Kevin mentioned, we've reached an agreement in principle with our vendor contractor. We anticipate the kickoff date to be August 20th, and then at that point, there'll be, you know, a major investment against the contract.
Okay, so is this the first time that we're okaying the first 16 million, or did we already do that?
If I could
You've already-
Yeah.
explain, if you might recall, Senator, in the budget bill, it actually has appropriated under the capital line for the Department of Revenue 16.1 million in fiscal year 18, and 16.9 million in fiscal year 19. The Department of Revenue was here a year ago in June before the committee asking for release of the FY18 money to use that to start the project. We knew that not all of that 16.1 million would be used in FY18, but the idea was to allot the money in 18, allow the department to use what they need to use, but then whatever was left in 18 would roll over into fiscal year 19, and then they're back here again asking for their 19 appropriation to be approved so they can have access to those funds to then start the bulk of the project, which will occur in fiscal year 19 as well as in subsequent fiscal years. So they've got their 16.1 million, which
Right.
they've spent about 3 million of.
Right.
That leaves about 13 million. Now they're asking for the 19 appropriation.
And that's why I'm asking the question. You're asking for the 19 appropriation, but you've still got 13 million left from the 18? You still have 13 million sitting there?
Yes, that's correct.
So why are we doing this now? That's what I don't get.
Because there's going to be milestone payments throughout
Yeah.
fiscal year 19 that
So-
exceed the
so-
13 million.
Yeah, many of those payments are front-loaded. They're license fees, et cetera, that come roughly to $10 million.
Yeah.
That'll be at the very beginning, at the inception of the project.
So that would have
Okay.
been the bulk of the spend for, the 18 appropriation, the 16.1. And then as we go through this initial first 12-month phase of the project, and we seek to implement corporate taxes as well as other taxes, we'll have to pay another milestone payment once we reach that point,
Okay.
which will be about another $13 million.
Representative Cherry?
Thank you, and I appreciate, this is long overdue, but I was wondering, will the system allow, currently we can track school districts and counties in income tax. Will be, can we track cities or towns?
The notion is we'll be able to drill down into various jurisdictions. It will be open, yes.
That'll be great, thank you.
Senator Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know who can answer this question, but you spent $3 million of the initial fiscal year allocation for fiscal year 18. What type of minority and women business participation did you have on that $3 million?
I'm not sure we had any on the 3 million. I
Okay.
can tell you, as it relates to MeBe, Weebie, VB, of the implementation services component I referenced before, there's a $50.4 million component of that, which is a subset of the overall contract. And right now, for those three components, we're at 15%.
And you've got the names of those companies?
Yeah,
And
they're in the contract, yes.
Okay, so how do you plan on tracking those? One of the things that I'm hearing from the XBE community is that these projects get 2 or 3 years out. There's no compliance monitoring in those first 2 or 3 years. So then by the time you get to the end of the contract, which I think you said this was gonna be 48 months,
Yes.
46. So if you're in year 3, you haven't met the goals, how do you plan on tracking that? Have you heard that from the XBE community?
We have not heard that, but we do plan to have time tracking on all of the associates associated with the project, including those that represent MeBe, Weebie, VB partners.
Okay.
And we will track those each year. We have an IV&V partner as well that will help us track that and report back to us if we are lagging there and how we can remediate any of those situations as they arise.
All right, and the 15% that you're discussing, is that an aggregate or is that per category?
No, that's an aggregate.
That's an aggregate. So what's the category?
The category.
M, W, and V.
The M component is roughly 4.75 of the implementation services component, 4.75%. The WBE component is also 4.75%, and the veterans component is 5.15%. Once again, 15% of the implementation services. That implementation services takes out license fees, et cetera.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. You've excluded the licensing fees.
Yes, we have.
So what is that amount total then? What is that 15% of what total amount?
50.4 million.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Senator Brown?
Going to be a third-party administrator who will be, once the software is implemented, sort of monitoring and maintaining this, or is it all going to be in-house with the DOR?
Well, during the project, we'll have an IV&V that allows us to have that independent oversight. After the 47-month implementation, we will have a hybrid support structure. Part of the maintenance fee that's in the 10 years after the 47-month implementation is associated with the FAST team, the FAST Enterprises team. They'll have a level 1 support on-site with us, which will partner and be a hybrid team with individuals or associates that work for the state.
So that's just a support team. So the data, the state's data will not flow through the FAST team?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Next, Department of Administration, Matt Kent.
committee today, and this is the annual release of R&R payments from IDOA to IFA managed facilities. These facilities were previously bonded through the IFA, and a portion of the original bond payment was to go towards the long-term capital planning for these facilities. Now that these bonds have been defeased, we continue to fund the capital R&R through this funding mechanism. Some of the projects you would see with these dollars would be large-scale HVAC renovations, chiller replacement, and also roof replacement. The facilities that are listed on the agenda are as follows: Government Center North and South, Government Center parking garages, the Forensic Lab, and State Museum. Those are all funded through general fund. And then Rockville and Pendleton Juvenile Correctional Facility are funded through post-war. Again, this is an annual release of dollars, so I come before Budget Committee every time about this year to release these dollars. Any questions on that?
Thank you.
All right, thanks, sir.
Next, Department of Natural Resources, Mr. Smith.
Good morning, everyone. Prior to my agenda item, I would like to follow up on a couple of items mentioned at the last meeting. Director Dudich asked about future playground improvement requests. DNR plans to submit Phase 3 of playground improvements for consideration in the next biennium's budget in an approximate amount of about $1 million. This will, $1 million. This will complete the need for a minimum of one ADA accessible playground at every state park and forestry property in the state. And we have less than 20 properties remaining in that endeavor. Chairman Brown asked how 2018 camping reservations and revenue was comparing to 2017. Overall camping, which includes reservations and walk-ins, is running about the same, just over 2017, with revenue close to $12 million. This is through May. We had a real good Memorial Day. We had 3 properties exceed $100,000 in revenue for the 3-day weekend. Those 3 properties were Brookville Lake, Monroe Lake, and Dunes State Park. Through May, total state parks revenue is about 5% ahead of last year at $27.3 million compared to $26 million at the end of May in 2017. DNR is requesting funding to rehab a control structure at Winona Lake. The structure was originally constructed in 1976 with an estimated useful life of 25 years and is beginning to show signs of disrepair. There have been no renovations since the original construction. The design portion of this project was funded in October 2017 and has just been completed. The project will drive heavy sheet piling and pour a concrete retaining wall to extend the service life. Existing control gates will be replaced with stainless steel. DNR is responsible for approximately 60 similar control structures statewide.
Any questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next, we have Pendleton Correctional Facility.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's been my pleasure to take this committee through a couple of our facilities, a couple of our older prisons in the last few years. One of those being the Pendleton Correctional Facility. One of the unique architectural aspects of that facility is of a 1920s, 1930s maximum security prison is the long linear control building with outwardly radiating cell houses. When we were there, we talked about the problems with controlling the roof. So those tall, multi-storied cell houses, the way they intersect. This particular cell house was installed in 1925. We did a renovation in the 1960s. They did some things incorrectly. This project replaces some masonry, some mortar, some control joints, some intersecting roof angles, replaces some steel in these housing units. This project was originally brought before the Budget Committee in the fall of 2017. We were hoping to get started in spring of 18. When we opened bids in March of 18, we had found a little bit more damage that added to the cost of the project. When we opened bids, we were over budget. So this is for additional funding of about just under $90,000 to this project, bringing it to a total of $225,000. I have absolute confidence that this, all variables now being known, that this will take care of the problem for at least the next 50 years and resolve all the water infiltration issues in that building and allow us to accept the bids.
Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Gerald.
Senator Taylor?
Question. When I was reviewing this packet, $225,000, I thought we had established a kind of a requisite number with $300,000 before they had to come before the committee.
You want to answer that?
Yeah, good question, Senator. Right now, as I mentioned in our April Budget Committee meeting, the policy in 1994 was any state agency with a capital project or assessment or study over $100,000 comes to the Budget Committee. Anything under that goes through administrative action through the budget agency. One of the discussions items that I'm going to request for the committee is to raise that threshold since it was established in 1994. So this project, in theory, if that policy were to have been in effect earlier, this project would not be on the agenda, it would go through the administrative action process. So a future discussion, hopefully in about 20 minutes.
Oh, okay. Was Doc Brown around in '94?
I'm not gonna answer that question.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Department of Transportation. You answered the question I was going to ask you. I'll just call you after the review and you can talk about that.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name's Steve McAvoy. I'm Statewide Facilities Director for NDOT. Before I get into the projects, I want to let you guys know that Matt Wolf had asked me for a summary of our future building construction and a timeline. I've given that to him and he'll distribute it to you later. Our first project on the agenda is we formally request funding in the amount of $7.2 million for the construction of a 23,954 square foot subdistrict building in Crawfordsville. This new subdistrict building will replace the existing 6,750 square foot subdistrict building that was built in 1966. It will be constructed on the existing site. The existing subdistrict building does not allow for OSHA-approved work clearances or proper ventilation within the garage space. In addition, the age and condition of the structure has contributed to other operational and environmental issues such as ADA accessibility, insufficient electrical service, site drainage, and stormwater runoff. Construction of the new subdistrict will mitigate these concerns while keeping in line with the current industry standards of pricing for similar NDOT subdistrict buildings. In addition, the construction of this new subdistrict will reduce the amount of time it takes to service our dump trucks, thus reducing public safety concerns, especially during a snow fight. Upon completion of the new subdistrict building, the existing subdistrict building will be demolished.
Any questions?
Okay. The next project we have on the list is we are formally requesting funding in the amount of $252,000 for the architectural and engineering fee for the construction of a 7,000 square foot unit building and a 15,475 square foot, 3,500 ton salt building in Brookville. This new unit building will replace the existing unit building that was built in 1968, and the new salt building will replace the existing salt dome that was built in 1976. Both buildings will be constructed on a new site that we just recently purchased in Brookville. The existing site is too small to accommodate the new unit building and salt building. And the existing unit building does not allow for OSHA-approved work clearances within the garage space. In addition, the age and condition of the structure has contributed to other operational and environmental issues. The inability to wash trucks inside with containment, site drainage, and stormwater runoff issues. The existing salt building does not allow for salt to be offloaded and loaded under roof out of the weather. Offloading and loading of salt outside in winter weather is unsafe and also contributes to on-site salt contamination. Construction of this new unit building and salt building will mitigate all these concerns while keeping in line with the current industry standards of pricing for similar unit buildings and salt buildings.
Any questions? Senator Talley?
Also should state, upon completion of the new unit and salt building, the existing Brookville unit site will be sold.
Yeah, thank you. This is just a little question. I've been on this committee now for a number of
Right.
years, and every summer you come to us with
Right.
new salt building projects.
Right.
Don't you have like a McDonald's format by now? I mean, don't you have like a standard building that?
We have a basis of design for all of the buildings
Yeah.
that we build. Salt buildings, unit buildings, sub-districts. So we basically, the basis of design is where we start.
Right.
And we adapt the design somewhat for each specific region.
So even though you have a format, you're still at this kind of prices for design work?
Yeah, because we still have to site adapt it. And some locations, such as Crawfordsville, they have 4 more mechanics than they did in Plymouth. So I have to increase the square footage of the building, which is going to drive up the cost of design. So, I mean, our designers, we hold them to high standard. Their fees are never over 7%, many times less than 7%. And we get what we pay for.
Okay.
Senator
Thank you.
Taylor?
Yes. The Brookville Road site, that's over in Indianapolis, right? That's the
Brookville's on the east side
of-
of Indiana.
Right.
Right.
On the east side of Indiana?
Yeah, Brookville. It's in the Seymour district.
Not Brookville Road?
No, not Brookville Road. Brookville, Indiana.
Okay, and you're gonna sell that.
Yeah, we're going to sell it.
Have you put it on the market yet?
No, we have to get our new facilities up and running. They'll offer, political notification first.
Okay, so you're gonna go through the bidding process
Absolutely.
for that site or anything?
Yeah, we
You
always
don't
do
have a plan?
political notification first. If we don't get any takers, then we'll dispose of it through the bid process, through IDOA.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, next one.
Okay, so our next project is statewide HVAC replacements. We formally request funding in the amount of $476,800 for the following HVAC projects. We have 2 rooftop HVAC units in Crawfordsville on their administration building, 2 rooftop HVAC units in the Seymour district at their admin building, 2 boilers and pumps at the Seymour admin building, and the Greenfield administration building's variable air volume control and the building automation system. The rooftop HVAC units at Crawfordsville and Seymour have exceeded their life expectancy of 20 years, and further repair costs would not be effective in extending their life cycle. The 2 boilers at the Seymour administration building are also 20 years old and are failing and have reached their full life expectancy. Continued repair and maintenance would not extend their life expectancy. In addition, the Greenfield administration's building's 20-year-old variable air volume controls and building automation system have reached their mechanical life expectancy. They are outdated, no longer able to be supported. The new building automation control system will not be proprietary to allow for future system flexibility.
Any questions? Representative Brown?
Thank you. Do you anticipate some energy cost savings with these new units, or do you know that?
Oh, I definitely would. I would say 20 to 30% at a minimum.
Okay.
All right, next project.
Okay, our last project is statewide roof replacements. We request funding in the amount of $645,700 for the replacement of 12 roofs at various NDOT locations across the state. These roof replacements will address structural, environmental, and operational issues. The average age of the roof is 20 years old and reflects salt dome shingled roofs and EPDM rubber roof systems. Patching of these roofs over time has occurred in an effort to extend their life cycle. However, recent annual roof assessments identified significant defects beyond the routine preventative maintenance and necessitate replacement.
Senator Brown?
Do you have any solar panels on any of your NDOT buildings?
We don't have any across the state, no.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We have 2 review items.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Yes.
The process that we, yeah, I think I've brought this up before, but when we do these projects, I mean, everybody knows the questions I'm gonna ask. I don't think it's no secret that I'm very concerned about the MEB, WEB, VB stuff. I'm calling it XBE stuff, so everybody knows. And in these summaries, I've brought it up before, how about we just start reporting what they are? So that I don't wanna keep asking over and over again. Has that been discussed with the departments? I've spoken with the Department of Administration, the new director, and I think that she's willing to go that route. Just so we have it. And I mean, some of these smaller projects, like finding roof replacements down in southern Indiana, you're not gonna find anybody that can go down there and do that work. And I get it. But, you know, when we have big IT projects and things like that, there's a plethora of minority women-owned businesses that I think should be participating. This is state taxpayer dollars. And I just think it would be appropriate to just have it in the summer. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but it's just something I think would be good administrative.
You want to touch on that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Taylor, excellent question. One thing, as we put together these summaries, is a lot of these projects have not been bid yet.
Right.
So we do not know what the participation will be on those bids or on those projects until IDOA goes out and procures the services. So it would be premature for us to say a $6 million project at NDOT is going to garner this amount of XBE participation. We're simply authorizing the dollars. So I think would be helpful maybe, and we saw that a little bit when Department of Administration came and spoke to the committee on the universities, is maybe following up as part of the discussion is, there were several projects that were let. How is the state doing on XBE participation globally? But my concern is, and I'm looking at staff, but my concern is a lot of these projects have not been let yet. So we definitely will be pushing for XBE participation, but won't know the final number until the department and the agency, Department of Administration agency, have bid those and then receive the bids back and scored them and to determine who has an XBE participation. But I think working with Commissioner Crane and our office, if there's something that we can provide either post-project or on a quarterly or annual basis to show where we are, and my guess is the Department of Administration probably produces a MEB-WEB XBE report that shows the state's participation, which I think was one of the slides that the commissioner shared with us in April.
Right, yeah, I think that's appropriate. Now that I think about it from a practical standpoint, just the Department of Revenue deal, the IT deal, though, they had already had in their contract that they would do it. So they should be able to report that, but without me having to ask it. Okay, that makes sense, especially for those HVAC and other projects that have not been let yet. I think it's good. And there's a lot of VBEs that do that kind of work, by the way. A lot of VBEs out there that are HVAC certified, so.
Good, fair question.
Yep.
Any other discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're going to start, first review item is the airport development excise distribution. Mr. Blake?
Yeah, good morning, Chairman and members of the Budget Committee. My name is Marty Blake. I'm a manager of the NDOT Office of Aviation. I'm happy to discuss airport development with you this morning. In July of 2013, Indiana's airports began collecting an excise tax on aviation fuel from vendors around the state. These funds were deposited into the state's general fund. Beginning in July of 2017, the aviation fuel excise tax was increased, with 50% being directed into the general fund and 50% into the Airport Development Grant Fund. NDOT is requesting the available excise tax revenue collections from fiscal year 2018 be made available to the agency for matching of federal airport grants as indicated in the biennium budget bill. As of May 23rd, the amount available of revenue is $1,749,476. NDOT works diligently to prepare a 5-year comprehensive capital improvement program with the FAA for Indiana State Aviation System airports. The current plan forecasts a statewide matching grant need with 5%, approximately $2.7 to $3.5 million per year for the next 5 years. Indiana system airports are required to submit their 5-year plan to the NDOT Office of Aviation every February. Each airport's plan includes a wide variety of projects that are extremely important to the airport. The FAA utilizes their national priority rating system to scrutinize and rank each project based upon impacts to safety, obstructions, capacity enhancements, etc. NDOT and the FAA are required to trim the program down to the required limited federal funding target levels, where the highest priority projects receive that limited funding. NDOT and the FAA work together and approve each project which is recommended for application, and thus begins the grant process for federal and state grants. NDOT's participation in our current airport development programs help reduce the local entities' match and helps local airports leverage all the federal funding they can get to maintain and enhance their infrastructure. Airports are a vital piece of our transportation network, enhancing the economic development of each community they serve.
I have a question. So I'm looking here, it says, looks like we put up 2.6 million, the locals put up 2.6, and we draw down about 48 million in federal funds? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, last year, we ended up with 40, actually, it was over 50 million last year, 59.8. So we're close to 16. Total project with the airports having their 5% and ours is roughly between 60 and 70 million each year coming into the state.
So I'm looking on this chart, and I see some small communities that, I gotta be honest with you, I didn't even know they had airports. And so I guess my next question is, what kind of projects are some of these airports? I mean, like a South Bend, you see it, Fort Wayne, but some of these smaller communities, what kind of projects are they doing with this money?
It's a wide variety of projects, and the eligible list of projects that the FAA funds, there's anything from runway pavement rehabilitation. Our runways fail just like our roads. So we're out doing pavement inspections every year. We receive a federal grant from the FAA at NDOT, and we go out and we do an inspection on each one of those, a PCI, evaluation, pavement condition index. So a lot of runways need rehabilitation. Most of these facilities were built very early, in the 50s and 60s, and they need a constant rehabilitation effort, much like our roads and bridges.
I mean, any of these still grass runways? I mean, sometimes I see some of these small grass
We have,
runways.
and some of those are the most
No,
beautiful.
I'm serious.
Some of those are the most beautiful facilities you'll ever see.
So we
It's
do
just a
still
great
have
day.
some
We
grass
do still have those. None of those are receiving federal
Okay,
funds.
just checking, just checking.
So, yeah.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, and I appreciate, the projects here, and everyone is probably very near and dear to each community. But I'm wondering, is there any economic impact rating on some of these projects? It seems like we could get better bang for our buck if we invested in Fort Wayne versus Knox, maybe in South Bend versus Tell City type of thing. And in limited dollars, would it be better to have an increased percent where we get a better economic impact?
Sure, I can answer that. So the bang for the buck, it really comes down to, for each one of these projects, people are working in that community. We're putting Indiana people to work on each one of these construction projects at these facilities, regardless of what community it's in. But the best thing I can possibly say to that is our budget bill, the current biennium budget bill, only allows us to spend matching dollars on these, or spend these funds on these matching projects for federal grants. So we don't have, I can't go spend, $400,000 at an airport unless the federal grant is ponying up the 90% piece of that, according to our current spending authorizations in the budget bill.
But again, we don't discern at the state level between projects, do we not, other than safety and congestion?
We do. So we have to follow, because we're looking at matching projects only, we have to go through the federal system. So each of those federal dollars is competed with on the national level. So indeed, the project at Knox would also compete with a smaller airport in Michigan or in Florida. So it's a national system, and those projects are given a rank, and then we come down to the funding levels at each state, and then those projects fit into that bill that way. Other states are also doing state-local programs, and we used to have a program like that in Indiana. We suspended that due to limited funding in the early 2000s, where we did a 50% grant, and then the community pitched in 50% as well.
So no federal funds?
No federal funds.
Again, I guess I'm just a little concerned long-term that we should be happy that we took from a you know, a Missouri city to get an Indiana city, when maybe the economic impact would be we should be more aggressive for South Bend or Evansville.
Sure, and so that's the thing, when you compare our commercial service airports to our general aviation airports, we do have some surprises in there. Obviously, our certain airports, Indianapolis, Evansville, South Bend, Fort Wayne, are going to have a very high economic impact because of that piece of the puzzle. But we don't want to underestimate corporate traffic. For example, in our last 2012 economic impact study, Columbus Municipal Airport, phenomenal. I mean, stacks right up with those commercial service airports, just a few $100,000 beneath some of our smaller hub airports.
Do you think the corporations that use airports like that would want to have a user fee that would make their airports safe and less congested as opposed to tax dollars?
A user fee imposed.
I mean,
by
why does the state get into this making Columbus the same as South Bend when, you know, it's based for a few corporations coming in and out? I guess I look at that in over $2 million for Paoli.
Mm-hmm.
And I presume that's to get in and out of the resorts down there. I mean, it seems like they ought to contribute quite a bit to getting in and out of the resorts. I don't know what the economic impact to fly in and out of Paoli is.
Paoli had a really large runway extension project, and because they only had 3,000 feet, so they just extended.
Again, why did they have to extend it? Because corporate jets want to fly in and out of there.
That's right, and then they buy fuel and they make money, and then they give tax dollars for the reason I'm here today, to help support our system.
But again, wouldn't Fort Wayne, Evansville, Indianapolis, South Bend benefit more than Paoli?
Those large commercial airports also collect passenger facility charges, so they get a separate pot of federal money that comes into there. So for each plane passenger, you pay a tax when you buy a ticket. So they're collecting revenue from those sources as well. And our smaller communities, there's business going on in every airport in our state and every public use airport that we have. So I think investing in that system makes us at a macro level much stronger as a state.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Senator Taylor?
Yes. I don't want to confuse this, but we leveraged $2 million of state money. That's all we paid. Locals chipped in, right? Almost the same as the state chipped in.
Exactly the same.
So there's the local investment.
And maybe more in some cases,
Okay,
actually.
but there's the local investment, so it's not like we're picking up the majority of the cost. As a matter of fact, if you look at it, we're picking up 5% of the cost. The locals are picking up the other 5%, and then the feds are picking up 90%. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there is some investment by local communities. But to the point that Chairman Brown brought up, you can't buy jet fuel for your car, right? I mean, I guess we could. I don't know. Maybe Representative Brown has something that can use jet fuel. But so what I'm saying is, isn't it already a user fee? I mean, the only people, because this money comes from a jet fuel tax.
It's all aviation fuel, so it's
Okay.
aviation gasoline, which is
Right.
like unleaded, really, and then it's also the jet fuel, which is the kerosene.
Okay,
for the jets.
so if you fly a plane and you use fuel, you pay the tax. If you don't fly the plane, you don't use fuel, you don't. So it's already a user tax, right?
That's correct.
I think that's what he was asking.
I'm sorry, I'm having.
It's a user tax already is what I'm trying to say, Mr. Chairman.
I understand that, but I guess what's gonna happen in the next economic downturn, because we went through this cycle once where the state went to 2.5%, and oh my gosh, we thought the Armageddon was coming to the aviation industry. But I see a recession sometime in the future where some sort of distribution's gonna have to change. And if we don't have a mechanism in place ranking the economic impact of these different projects, again, it's going to be Armageddon to the aviation industry, and we're all gonna hear about it.
Right, okay, yeah, I could see that, except for the fact that it's all based on use. So if they don't fly, they don't pay the tax, we don't get the revenue, we don't need to upgrade the thing. And by the way, I thought according to the economic model used by our federal government, we were not gonna see a recession in the next few years.
Well, I didn't say when.
Well, another concern is how long can the federal government sustain a 90% match? It's kind of like the IGT in the healthcare industry. You know, how long can the federal government continue
It's low-hanging fruit
Correct.
to trim.
Correct. Somebody had a question. Senator Brown?
Yeah, I want to follow up, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Browns. I agree, I'm a little concerned, sure, I mean, we always say, well, there's all this federal money hanging out there and it's only 10%, but some of these are for, not just repair and maintenance, but acquiring land, I assume for runways, some of it actually says that. But my district, we have the Fort Wayne International Airport, but we only have 8 gates, and we have limited number of direct flights, which are businesses, and I think probably splitting up with this end, the orthopedic industry in Warsaw would like to see more, not just the businesses here. But getting back to that original decision, like Columbus, I'm gonna guess it's the driver is Cummins. But if some of that money was shifted and we had bigger projects, for example, the Indianapolis airport, that maybe had more direct flights, then maybe those who rely on the Columbus wouldn't need to have that, the corporate, or whatever the heck is flying in there. But like in my district, we have 2 projects at Smith Field. Well, Smith Field does have some training for aviation-related businesses or jobs, but it's also, that's just recreational more. So my point is, you know, that's great, but that neighborhood, there was actually a question where, when it was going through some issues, economic issues years ago, whether that was even a good place to continue to maintain it. And now it's completely surrounded by residential and business. So I guess my point is, I mean, I know that's not a lot of money, but if Fort Wayne International could use that money instead and shift that almost $200,000 federal money with the grants, I wonder if we'd get more to Representative Brown's bang for a buck instead of lots of little bitty projects. Sure, I get the point about spending money in the community, but 90%, I agree, that's not gonna be there forever. And then we're gonna have these little airports and little runways all over the place that we're gonna be asked to maintain.
So to dovetail on that, so our airport system, we are not a block grant state for the Federal Aviation Administration. NDOT does not get to direct the federal funds, much like we do on the highway side. So we work in conjunction with the FAA to help mold and shape for the limited dollars going to the best possible projects. And each of those projects has significant impact for that facility, and there are a high amount of business users at Smith Field, actually, that are flying in and out of there for corporate daily work. The point of this reliever airport system is to relieve congestion at those large airports. So our corporate users who are flying into the Smith Fields and the Columbus, they are actually looking to get in and out and get where they're getting and then get home. So people are flying into Fort Wayne and choosing Smith Field so that they don't have to taxi all over the huge airfield and get to where their destination is. They can just pull up and they're there and they get right in the car and go do what they need to do. So the value of this smaller airport system is often underestimated, and that's a nationwide issue too, but we're not directing this. I mean, we're helping assist the federal dollars, but I can't say the FAA is going to spend $200,000 at Smith Field to do a study, then to plan a future expansion project. Then that's what the FAA's decided to do at that point, when we have to encourage that development.
So if I'm an airport and I want to apply for a project, I want to extend my runway, am I understand this, that I apply to the federal government for the grant and you just help facilitate me to get that grant? Is that, so I apply straight to the federal government is what you're saying, correct?
Right. All of our airports apply directly to the FAA for their grants, and then the state is matching those dollars.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Northwest RDA. Mr. Hannah.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be in front of you today. I appreciate your time. I just have short reviews of some projects here that are before you today, and if it pleases the chairman and the committee, I can give you a brief update on the rail projects as well. Sure. Thank you. Just very quickly on the ones that are listed on the material in front of you, there's East Chicago Waterfront Access and Economic Development Project. This is the third and final phase of a urban redevelopment project done in accordance with the Marquette Plan, and it's part of the first 10-year legacy of the RDA, where we did quality of place projects, connecting communities to the lakeshore. So there's been a lot of demolition there, new housing starts and economic development, and it does relate to the train project in the sense that we're trying to make the community ready for a real estate play in the Chicago market. We're seeing some success there today. So this would be really the last of the large projects during this next phase of the train construction, where you would see lakeshore dollars out at this level. We've done all of these projects in a phase format in order to maintain accountability with the grantee and measure the results along the way. Are there any questions that you might have about that particular project?
Representative Brown.
Thank you. Bill, notice that a senior center, is that going to be low-income senior center, or is it going to be diverse level?
It will be diverse, and thank you for that question. Some of the issues, that highlights one issue in East Chicago, which is about gentrification or maintaining living options for people who are currently there. So they're replacing a facility, and it's a marked improvement from what exists today that many of the residents are living in.
And if we have residents there, there's enough amenities as far as retail around that center?
Yes, yeah, part of this project includes, there are new retail options in the area, more diversity in the other housing options. Some of this looks like what you see in Bronzeville near Chicago, more of a brownstone type development. There's a group out of Chicago doing some of that. We've created a plaza called Unity Plaza in the community that functions like a downtown park, and it's interesting. I went there for the opening of it, and I had a young lady come up to me, and she had a baby in a stroller, and she said, I want to thank you for supporting this project, because it's the first time in years I've lived down the street. I really feel like coming here to this main street and feel like we have a real downtown to be a part of, and I think that's starting to happen there. Mayor Copeland has been very aggressive. You've probably seen a lot of the things that he has done really in support of this project to try to reposition the community to attract more retail options and make it a much more livable place to be for all ages, but certainly focused on the retired community along with it. So.
Senator Talley.
Yeah, Bill, how much, you say this combines federal funds. What kind of federal funds are going into this project along with the RDA funds?
Sure. Yeah, there's multiple sources that come with a project like this, because you're really affecting all of the infrastructure in the area, so there can be sewer separation dollars. But we work with Congressman Visklowski's office on trying to find as many match dollars as we can. So it's the full range. It could be the housing components
do you know,
of it.
I mean, like an approximate amount of
I
how
can,
much
I can
money's
give
in
you
this
a list
project?
and an amount, and which particular programs are being fed into this. I don't have that with me today. I apologize for that, but I would be happy to give it to the committee.
Okay, thank you.
So, sure.
One question.
Senator Taylor.
Do any of your infrastructure upgrades have anything to do with energy sources, like electricity or anything?
Senator, they do from time to time. I mean, almost in every case, you're going to have at least relocation issues with utilities and so forth. This one doesn't have quite as many as some of the others do. Like the train, for instance, is going to cause quite a partnership with NIPSCO and others in the area, but this one would be more minimal. It'd be more like what you see in a classic residential or urban redevelopment project. Some of it has to do with sewer and water, but very minimal for us on this one.
Right, so the East Chicago part, you could see some infrastructure in the energy sector under NIPSCO and
Sure.
moving some lines.
Yeah, any of these look like any city redevelopment project
Okay.
where you're going to have those
Poles.
items as the pole relocation, some
Gotcha.
underground utilities, and they all have that in common, some more than others. This one's a broader project. One of the signatures of this one is a massive amount of demolition of vacant structures and other things, all directed by the city. And to answer your something that you had brought up earlier, all of the projects that are supported by RDA dollars, where we have jurisdiction over the dollars and their state revenue mixed with the locals, we have a 5 and 15 WBE, MBE requirement respectively.
I know that, you guys are doing a great job, thank you.
And we monitor that too, and we rate the projects along the way based on where they are, and they get, you know, the green light, yellow light, red light, depending on where they're at, and we'll actually stop funding until there's a correction made in order to be in compliance with that. So if you ever want to see those records or how we're tracking them, we're happy to provide those as well.
I got other people watching you guys.
All right. Thought you might.
All right, next project.
Mr. Chairman, the next one is Hammond Chicago Street Construction Project. This is just simply, we're doing a road realignment in the area in partnership with NDOT, and what we're trying to do is make some additional improvements than what would normally be done in order to facilitate better traffic flow near what is going to be the main station to connect the two train lines together. So we want to facilitate TOD or transit-oriented development in those areas, so we're providing some additional dollars to make those improvements.
Questions? All right, the last one.
And the last one is the NERPC, which is our MPO, Regional Planning Commission. They're doing a travel demand model, and again, it does relate to the South Shore train in the sense that we're trying to really make sure the alignments between all of the modes of transportation are there and that we're feeding ridership into the South Shore train. So we've sponsored this in the past, and we continue to do so. So on this whole list, you're really seeing a transition of the RDA from the last of the big shoreline projects that we'll do in a while to now these smaller items that are preparation items for development around the train.
Any questions for Bill? All right.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd like, I can give you a brief update on the rail projects and the federal. So, first of all, you know, pleasure to be in your area here at the end of the line, and I think that they might say the beginning of the line in South Bend. But we've had
South Bend, you better say beginning.
Beginning of the line. It all starts here. So today it all starts here. We're really pleased with the partnerships that have been developed, many of them with your help in the four-county area, unprecedented cooperation with respect to that. And then, you know, the funding that has been given to the project from the locals spread equally across the four counties to match up with the state dollars that were provided in 2017 for double tracking has been really a positive thing for everybody, along with the Westlake, which was provided by the General Assembly in 2015. We've been working with Mr. Dudich and Dan Hughey and the NICTE team to really form up a solid financial package and to progress through the FTA's application process on both projects. We are asking for a rating on Westlake coming up this fall. A rating is really the precursor to being eligible for funding. And we're continuing to work on double track in the same fashion. So we've constructed this team for oversight, cost containment, and on-time delivery, and to produce the best rating that we can with the FTA. We were recently in DC and met with the leadership of the FTA, and we've established a constant working group with them. And the goal really is to get a project into the fiscal 19 funding cycle. In order to do that, we have to remove some contingencies from some of the financial obligations that we've made so we can move them from committed, or from budgeted rather in the FTA's eyes to a committed status. And so some of those items are being processed through the RDA and the IFA now, will be bundled up after the IFA sees them and then brought to this particular body for review. So it would be wonderful if we could spend some time with all of you individually between here and the next meeting and really walk through some of the specifics about that. And so, but in short, it just makes us eligible to progress. As far as the federal funds are concerned, As you have probably been aware of, the capital improvement grant programs, which is where these would be funded from, have continued to be supported by Congress, even though the White House through OMB has zeroed out those accounts. So Congress keeps coming back with not just reinstating those funds, but actually increasing them, and they're projecting the same for fiscal 19. One of the variables that we're facing right now is timing about funding cycle with respect to that issue. Because there's no directive from the White House right now on spending down those dollars, it may fall to the FTA to figure out how to advance up to 44 projects that are in the pipeline right now. So we're in uncharted waters with respect to timing and foreseeability about process. On the positive side, Congress continues to fund these projects. And so our congressional delegation in Washington, D.C. has been extremely supportive in both parties. Jason and myself and others have been working with them continually, and so we feel like we're in a good position at this point, and we'll get some more clarity, I think, this fall on the fate of those funding projects and how perhaps we can expect those dollars to be administered.
Any questions? Mr. Didich?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things I wanted to note. One, I want to thank Bill and the RDA for their work on this project. They've been leading this initiative alongside with the Indiana Finance Authority and the Northern Indiana Commuter Transit District. I always get the C and the T mixed up, but Mike Nolan and his group, I know he'll probably call me and remind me the exact acronym, but NICD. But want to thank that group. That group has come together very quickly to work with the FTA and to polish up the submission for the Westlake project and begin preparing for the double track project. So understands there has been a lot of work by the RDA, NICD, and the IFA to prepare for the submission. I would encourage Bill and his team, NICD and IFA, to start reaching out to Budget Committee members. The goal is to have the submission to the FTA by September 1st, roughly, as the group has discussed, but that obviously requires 1, IFA board approval, and 2, Budget Committee approval. The likeliness that this group will be hearing that project in August is pretty high, so I've encouraged Bill and his team, as well as others, to come visit the members to discuss the project in detail. If there are any committee members that would like to have that discussion sooner rather than later so we can educate you, we're happy to do that, and Bill as well, and Dan Hughey and Mike Nolan. But I would just prepare the committee that likely in August, if possible, to bring the project for the financing of the double track and Westlake project before you. You might recall that there is $12 million appropriated for the state share of the debt service related to the project for both double track and Westlake. So just want to give you fair warning that August might be a lengthy discussion on the project by the NICD, RDA, and IFA team.
Any other questions? Thank you, Bill.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for all your support. It's much appreciated. And members, thank you.
Are there any motions to remove anything from the agenda? Not yet.
Discussion item, do we want to have?
Well, why do we got to do this first, and then I can get to the discussion?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for correcting
So,
me.
Move the agenda.
can I have a motion on the agenda?
Second.
Second.
Can we take that by consent?
Consent.
Thank you. Do you want to take it by consent?
We can do that?
Unless somebody wants to vote no.
I thought we always voted.
No, I can if you feel better.
You can take a voice vote.
Would you rather do that?
Never mind. I just thought we always voted.
Okay. Thank you. With that, we'll hit some discussion items. So, Mr. Dudich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This dovetails perfectly into the question that Senator Taylor asked. At our last meeting in April, I asked a question to the budget agency staff as to the threshold of what capital projects for state agencies go before the budget committee and which projects are done through the administrative action process within the budget agency. And it was identified that back in 1994, this body set a policy that any state agency with a capital project $100,000 or higher would be reviewed by the state budget committee. That is a policy, and so I did ask staff to go back and take a look at what other options we could look at in terms of amending that threshold looking ahead. There is precedent for this. You might recall that universities have a threshold in code that if those projects or those capital needs are below a certain dollar amount, Those projects sometimes do not go before the commission or the budget committee, or if they're over that dollar amount. And in past years, those dollars amount have been amended to account for inflation and cost of capital and construction. The same situation places itself here with that policy, and so, again, 1994, it's been 24 years, and so just looking at some indices, construction indices, as well as Consumer Price Index and Midwest Consumer Price Index, Matt Wolf on our staff looked at some numbers and felt that based on the last 24 years, it might be a good time to revisit that policy and increase that dollar amount. What we found is that if we've looked at those different indices and identified what dollar amount might be appropriate, it seems that though $250,000 would be a good new threshold to consider for the Budget Committee. To put some perspective in this, since 2015 to April of this year, there have been 187 state agency projects that have been reviewed by the Budget Committee, not including university projects. 43 of those, I'm sorry, not including state university projects, 187 projects for state agencies. 43 of those were $250,000 or less. And that includes mostly repairs and rent replacement projects. We just saw one at the DOC, but mostly HVAC projects, HVAC replacement, roofing replacement, repairs, design work assessments, and studies. And so as I mentioned in April, I wanted our staff to come back and make a recommendation to the committee to amend the policy, and I would propose the following. One, that the amount of $100,000 that we agreed to in 1994 be increased to $250,000 for state agency capital projects, with the exception of projects that are related to design work, architecture, design, assessments, and studies remain at the $100,000 level. The reason for that is oftentimes those design work or architecture and design projects then mean another project is coming down the pike at some point in the future. Typically, as Steve mentioned, is what we've seen is 7 to 10% of the cost of the project is the architecture, engineering, design work. So what we did not want to do is create a higher level for the design, architecture, and engineering work that would then result in maybe higher dollar capital projects. So my recommendation, if the committee is comfortable with it, is to amend the policy to increase the state agency requirement to come before Budget Committee review to $250,000 or more for capital projects, and any projects related to design, architecture, engineering, assessment, or studies would still remain at the $100,000 level.
Any discussion? Senator Talley.
What's the university exemption?
There are several levels of university exemption. I probably will look at Matt, but I think Dr. Morrison probably knows them by heart by now, but several of them are R&R related, state funding only, no state funding related, but they're in the millions of dollars if I remember. If I could, $2 million for some R&R projects, I believe, but again, I don't know the detail. I'm happy to have Dr. Morrison maybe mention it, but they are in the millions of dollars for
So
university
they're considerably higher than what we would be looking at?
Yes, and they have
Okay.
been changed about every 5 or 7 years. They are increased because of just the general cost of construction, but this is a very small dollar amount compared to the university's threshold level.
So when in this recommendation that you're making, it would be for state agency projects excluding universities?
That would be correct.
All right, and it would also be excluding the design and architecture. Okay, all right.
Yes, ma'am.
Any discussion?
I just wanted to make sure on the record that Doc Brown wasn't part of that original rulemaking process.
I was not on
Okay.
Budget Committee at
Just
that
thought I'd ask.
time, but
Well, I just wanted to make sure, because, you know, you shouldn't be a part of the original and then get to change it too.
that's only what Senator Larry Morse would do, if you remember his legacy.
Okay, all right.
You want a motion?
So I guess why don't I do that? I'm going to go ahead and entertain a motion to make this amendment.
I move that we accept Director Dudich's recommendations for policy change for projects of state agency.
Second.
Would you like me to call the roll?
No, thank you. It's
Can we
all
take
right.
it? Can we take it by consent?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have another announcement you want to discuss?
If I could, very quickly before we end, one, I want to thank Matt and Sola from our office again coordinating the activities for the past 2 days. Appreciate the IU South Bend and Notre Dame as well as the various economic development organizations. So Matt and Sola, thank you. Another quick item of note, some of you may know this, but just for recognition, Deanna Owari, who has served in the budget agency for 7 years and currently serves as the minority deputy director, will be taking on a new role. Her last day with the budget agency is June 15th, and she will be taking on the role as Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Workforce Development. So we are very fortunate to keep her within the state. She served state government for 17 years and will continue to do so. But we do wish her the best. She has done a great job as a deputy director and overseeing tax and revenue, centralized accounting, pensions, management information systems at the budget agency. So she couldn't make it today, but I did want to publicly thank her for her service at the budget agency and her role as deputy director. She will be missed. I know she just loves coming to these things and seeing everybody. So if you do see her or happen to run into her or talk to her, please congratulate her on her new endeavor. And we will be looking for a replacement for that deputy very quickly. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments? First of all, I'd like to thank Notre Dame. You know, it was a beautiful day yesterday as we traveled around the campus. And I've lived here most of my life and saw things I'd never seen before at Notre Dame. So thank you for that. And thank IU, SB, and Chancellor Allison for breakfast this morning for hosting the meeting. I also want to shout out to Mr. Stephen Studer, who's one of my go-to people in this community. Helps with the RDA, legal counsel for our RDA here in the North Central region. Also acts as my personal attorney, so he's probably coming to make sure I'm doing everything correctly. So thank you for coming. But again, thank you for hosting us here today. And I also want to mention that our next meeting will be in Evansville, August 13, 14, and 15. So with that, we'll adjourn.
3 days?
Thank you.
Well, I think it's the travel time. They're giving an extra day to travel.
We want you to go out and